What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my top 50 overall fantasy football rankings for the 2025 season. Over the last couple of days, I've gone through my top 50 running backs, my top 60 wide receivers. Now we're combining all the positions together in my top 50, splitting these guys up into different tiers. Now, keep in mind, this isn't going to be super in-depth player breakdowns. It's more so how these positions kind of fit together. When am I targeting tight ends? When am I targeting quarterbacks? Where are the running back pockets, the wide receiver pockets, things like that. So if you enjoy the video, hit the like button, subscribe, let me know your thoughts down below. But let's just dive right into tier 1 here. And tier 1 is going to cover the 101 through my 107. Now, if I wanted to be super specific, I could have just made a 101 tier with Jamar Chase because he is my clear-cut top option. I'm not going to be in a single spot with the number 1 pick where I'm like, do I go Bijan? Do I go Jefferson, Lamb? If I have the number 1 pick, it is going to be Jamar Chase, barring some sort of preseason injury before week 1. But so Jamar Chase here is going to be my 101. Also, don't think I mentioned this at the top. This is based around PPR scoring, but you can obviously, make your minor adjustments for half-point PPR in standard. And then after Jamar Chase, I think there seems to be some consensus about the overall grouping of running backs that go from RB1 through 3, and then the wide receivers that go from wide receiver 2 to wide receiver 4. So those top 3 running backs, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, I think, the order of those 3 is going to change for some people. Personally, I do have Bijan Gibbs as my 102, 103. I have Saquon as my 105. Now, I think if you presume health for all of these dudes, Saquon probably comes out on top. I mean, we just saw him as the running back 1 last year, but I don't think there's a massive gap. I think they're all kind of peaking in that 22, 23 point per game area. And then when you just factor in the usage that Saquon had last year, nearly 500 opportunities, including the playoffs. Typically, guys who have handled that many opportunities either get hurt the next year or their production takes a dip. So with that potential risk, I do just slightly prefer those other running backs, but obviously within the same tier. And then at wide receiver from the number 2 through the number 4 spot, I think people have some sort of order of Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, and Puka Nacua. Now, I think a lot of people go Jefferson as the wide receiver 2, Lamb wide receiver 3, Puka Nacua wide receiver 4. I'm actually going to have a video coming out tomorrow, in depth breaking down all 3 of those dudes, kind of, ordering them how I would rank them. As you can see here, I went with CeeDee Lamb as my wide receiver 2. I have him as my, 104. Then Justin Jefferson, my wide receiver 3. Puka, my wide receiver 4. For Lamb, I'm just very confident in his offensive situation. He's flashed that super high ceiling, right? 23 plus points per game in 2023. And then Jefferson, Puka, still think these guys are really solid picks in the middle of the first round. So that was tier 1. Now moving into tier 2, this is going to cover my 108 through my 204. We're going to have Christian McCaffrey, Malik Neighbors, Nico Collins, Ashton Genty, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brian Thomas Jr., Devon Achane, Brock Bowers, and Derrick Henry. So I think there's some really interesting picks in the mid to later half of the first round where CMC, obviously a polarizing player. For me, I'm just in on the upside. At 108 with a healthy season, you could definitely be getting the most valuable player in fantasy football. Then we have some of these stud wide receivers, Malik Neighbors, Nico Collins. I've kind of flip-flopped these dudes throughout the offseason. Neighbors, you have this elite young talent, going to command a crazy amount of volume, but not the best offensive situation. For Nico Collins, not going to be the same target hog, but going to be on a better offense, way better quarterback play. Both these guys are really strong picks towards the end of the first round. Then I have Ashton Genty. I know he's a rookie, but I think he's going to have a really strong role here right out of the gate. 3-down skill set. I know some people think there's a big risk taking a rookie this early, but back end round 1 with his pedigree, the level of prospect he was, I'm fine with it. And then 2 wide receivers where I feel like they both deserve to go in the first round, but I have Amon-Ra St. Brown as my 112, Brian Thomas Jr. as my 201. If you're able to get any of those dudes that fall out of the first, I do think they're both really nice picks. Then the last 3 in this tier, Devon Achane, Brock Bowers, and Derrick Henry. So we do get our first tight end towards the end here, probably a little bit higher on Bowers than consensus. I just think he has upside at the tight end position that is very, very rare. And you look at some of the wide receivers he's being drafted around, like an A.J. Brown, a Drake London, Lad McConkey. I'm still in on all three of those wide receivers, but Brock Bowers has the chance to just straight up outproduce those dudes while also having the tight end designation. And so I think getting that type of like crazy elite upside at tight end is worth like the earlier round 2 pick. And you might be able to get them on some platforms like mid to late round 2. And then Achane Henry, I do prefer Achane, but I'm still fine with both of these dudes as like earlier round 2 picks. Now moving into tier 3, this is like mid round 2 towards the back end of round 2, 205 through the 210. I have AJ Brown, Drake London, Ladd McConkey, Jonathan Taylor, Trey McBride, and Bucky Irving. So we have those 3 straight wide receivers. I think this is like that next tier where maybe they don't have like the crazy nuclear ceiling, either based on like unproven talent or just their situation, but you feel good about these guys finishing as wide receiver ones on the season. For AJ Brown, this is obviously more of a situation issue than a talent thing. In a different offense, like AJ Brown could be in contention to be the wide receiver 1, but just low volume passing attack. That's kind of what we get here with the Eagles. And then for Drake London, Ladd McConkey, both guys you're hoping, take a leap here in their next season. Drake London, year 3 breakout. Ladd McConkey, a little bit of an older prospect, but had a really strong rookie season, really strong close in the second half. And then like both clear cut, number 1 weapons. London for a year 2 quarterback in Penix, Ladd McConkey for a very established Justin Herbert. Then the 2 running backs within this tier, Jonathan Taylor, Bucky Irving. I think both these guys have some potential things that hold them back from potentially competing to be like the running back 1 overall. For Jonathan Taylor, it's just the offensive situation. Is the touchdown upside going to be there? And then also some of his limited pass catching. But from a pure running back perspective, the dude is a top tier talent. He's going to be super productive on the ground, and they are going to force feed him. And then for Bucky Irving, just don't know if he's going to be like a 20, 21 plus opportunity per game guy. Pretty sure he's not, and he doesn't need to be that if you're drafting him like back end of round 2 or like, what is this, the 210 where I have him. So he's a very good player, really fun rookie season, will have that receiving upside on a good offense. And then this is where I have the second tight end. I think Trey McBride is someone who also could have the potential to rival some of these wide receivers going in like round 3. Probably not competing with like the A.J. Browns, the Drake Londons, the Ladd McConkeys. He's going to get peppered with targets, commanded a ton of volume last year. I still think this is kind of an ascending offense here with Marvin Harrison Jr. potentially taking a jump in year 2. Totally fine pulling the trigger on an elite tight end towards the back end of the second round. Then tier 4, this is going to be my 211 through my 304. And I think within this tier, there's going to be maybe 2-3 guys that I'm just way higher on than consensus. So I have T. Higgins, Tyreek Hill, Amarion Hampton, Chase Brown, Josh Jacobs, and then Breece Hall. A couple wide receivers to start us off here. For T. Higgins, don't think this is like crazy different from consensus. Was just the wide receiver 5 in points per game. Obviously has some upside capped playing behind Jamar Chase, but still someone who you're expecting to be a fantasy wide receiver 1. And then for Tyreek Hill, I'm just buying into the upside. I know there's risk, older wide receiver coming off a down season, but if we're looking at anyone who's going in like round 3 or later that you could realistically see being like a top 3 fantasy guy this year, I think Tyreek Hill is the best bet. Then within this tier, I think 2 running backs that people expect to be in this range, Chase Brown, Josh Jacobs. I like these guys 2-3 turn area. Then I also have 2 running backs that are typically going a lot later, potentially round 4, even round 5. And that is Amarion Hampton and Breece Hall. We just continue to get news that Najee Harris is not practicing. He doesn't have a timetable when they expect him to return. And that's really the only thing that's been holding back Amarion Hampton's value. And so I feel like people aren't reacting enough to this, where it's like, I could understand round 4 Hampton if you're projecting Najee to be super involved early on, and this is a gross split, and Hampton isn't like a, someone you feel confident starting until the second half of the season. But we're shifting more and more towards Hampton just being the locked-in week 1 starter if Najee's just not even on the field yet. And like I said, don't have a timetable out there. It's an eye injury, obviously something very serious. So for Hampton, I'm willing to take him even early round 3, like if push came to shove. Like my best player available, he'd be going early round 3. And then Breece Hall, believer in the talent. He's someone I've talked about in a lot of videos, but if you can get him 3-4 turn, round 4, he's someone I'd be willing to take like the early to mid round 3 area. Then this next tier, this is like middle round 3, very early round 4. I have Devontae Adams, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Xavier Worthy, George Kittle, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Mike Evans, and then Marvin Harrison Jr. So a lot of wide receivers within this tier, kind of moving away from running back for a little bit. We do get our first quarterbacks, and then also George Kittle in the mix here. Based on the different drafts, mock drafts that I've been diving into as of late, I've found that I'm much more willing to go after an elite tight end in the early rounds compared to an elite quarterback. So Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, as opposed to Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. And it doesn't really have anything to do with me not being confident in Lamar or Josh Allen. I mean, these guys are proven high-end quarterback ones. It's just that I have way more confidence in the quarterback position throughout the entire draft, where if I'm, not taking a Lamar, a Josh Allen, even like a Jaden Daniels, a Jalen Hurts, I'm totally fine waiting and going in the later rounds and getting a Justin Fields, a Drake May, even a JJ McCarthy, guys like that. Like, I'm totally willing to wait at the position. Whereas at tight end, when you start getting into those later round guys, it doesn't feel as great. Now, I'm still willing to do it, like, Colston Loveland, Tucker Kraft, interested in guys like that, but it certainly doesn't feel as great as just waiting and like picking up whatever solid proven quarterback is still available and just kind of been like left by the rest of the lobby. And so like you can see here, I'd be willing to take Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen in the middle of the third round. At least from what I've seen, they're just typically not there. And if they are there, there's still some other players that I like, potentially like a Breece Hall, Hampton, Tyreek Hill, guys that might be slipping or, lower ADP wise that I'd be willing to take ahead of these quarterbacks. And then I do want to touch on George Kittle because I have moved him up a little bit, a lot more willing to draft him here at like the 3-4 turn area. He's coming off a very impressive season. Obviously, we know the talent is there. And this 49ers group of weapons is just like very up in the air, pretty much across the board, where it's like you have no idea what to make of CMC's health. You look at the wide receiver room, you have Brandon Ayuk coming off a season-ending injury. You have Juwan Jennings, who's now dealing with like his second calf injury of the offseason. And you have Ricky Pearsall, who like had a strong close to the season last couple of games, but still very unproven as like a young weapon. And so it's very possible that George Kittle just has another monster season. And then there is the concern, though, right, that he doesn't command a crazy amount of volume. If some of these other weapons pan out, then maybe he's not giving you like that game-breaking production we saw last year. But 3-4 turn area, you're comparing him to some of these wide receivers that might have lower ceilings, like a Garrett Wilson, a JSN, guys like that. That's where I'm fine kind of taking Kittle within this range. And then the wide receivers, these are all guys that I kind of have within the same tier. Now moving into tier 6, this is going to go from my 402 through my 408. We have Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, Kenneth Walker, Kyron Williams, Terry McLaurin, Teteroa McMillan, and James Cook. So this is where we get that second grouping of quarterbacks. For Jalen Hurts, I just don't think he has quite the same upside as a Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, but with the tush push, the rushing production, especially in the touchdown department, that he's going to give you year to year, definitely belongs, in the top 4 quarterbacks for fantasy. And then for Jaden Daniels, obviously his rookie year production didn't really match the ceilings we've seen from like a Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, but he has that rushing upside that does give him that very high ceiling. And he's going into year 2. You're expecting him to get better. I do think he has better weapons heading into this season, even if they haven't made, crazy monster moves. Like adding Debo is something there. And so both of these elite quarterbacks, getting them at the start of round 4, pretty much anywhere in the round 4 area is fine. Then some of these running backs, probably higher on Kenneth Walker than consensus, and then lower on Kyron. I've made multiple videos kind of talking about why I'm higher on Walker and then lower on Kyron. Then some of these wide receivers, probably a little bit lower on Terry. I know on some platforms he's going 3-4 turn. I just feel like last year he wasn't able to get to wide receiver 1 status. That was while hitting in the touchdown department. I just don't want to draft someone whose probably baseline production is like mid to back end wide receiver 2. Like that's not a player I want to draft at the 3-4 turn. And then James Cook, probably a little bit lower on him. Kind of a similar situation where he really hit in the touchdown department. I just don't think the usage is there where you want to bank on him to be a running back 1 again. And then the final tier, this is going to be like back end round 4, early round 5, the 409 through the 502. This is just going to be wide receivers. This is where I start to hammer that position. DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, Jalen Waddle, George Pickens, Rashee Rice, and Devonta Smith. These are guys that, depending on the platform, might be available pretty much anywhere in round 5. Some of these dudes, maybe even round 6. Like I know Jalen Waddle, someone who typically is going later and someone who I'm really high on. And then just, platform dependent. Pickens might go a little bit later. Devonta Smith might go later. There's obviously going to be variance there, but this is where I'm looking at the wide receiver position. And so that is going to wrap it up for my top 50. Let me know your thoughts on these rankings. Who are some players you're higher on, lower on? If you haven't checked out the running back and wide receiver videos, go take a look at those. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.